All right, we're done talking about farts.
Yeah.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Skybound Insider. I'm Brian Mitchell.
And I'm Cassie King.
Cassie, you notice anything different about this set that we're in right now?
Other than the fact that it's black and white, Brian?
Why do you think that is?
I don't know, Brian. Why is it so black and white?
Well, because I wanted to bring to you the attention to detail of color. That's right, color. Arguably the most beautiful thing in the world. Not Beyonce, not the Northern Lights, not the birth of a small baby, not your pretty little face, but color. Today we are highlighting a very prolific colorist and artist in the comic book industry, Matt Wilson.
Wilson began coloring comics in 2003 with Xylanol Studios, where he replaced future East of West co-creator Nick Dragata. He eventually branched off in 2008 to begin his own independent work.
This would lead to such books as Phonogram, Young Avengers, Thor, Daredevil, Wonder Woman, Swamp Thing, The Wicked and the Divine, and Paper Girls. In 2015, Matt's hard work was even recognized with Eisner and Harvey Award nominations.
As an artist and a colorist who has some amazing experience in the field of comics, Matt Wilson has some excellent advice and knowledge to share with y'all, and I am so excited for you to see our chat. Take a look. Hi guys, I'm here with Matt Wilson, Rainbow Man, the man with all the colors himself. Matt, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
So we're gonna keep it general in the beginning and then we'll get into some minutia. First and foremost, how did you get your start in comics?
I went to art school, and at the time, one of the only art schools that had a degree in sequential art. And so I took a coloring for comics class.
Yeah.
And enjoyed it and did okay in it. And then there was another colorist, Lee Lowridge, who colors a bunch of stuff, Southern Cross. And so anyway, so he at the time had a studio there in Savannah where I was going to school, and like our coloring for comics class took a field trip to his studio. And then when I got out of college, kind of the only place in town I was interested in working in was at his studio. So I stopped by with a portfolio, and then just so happened like a few weeks after that, one of the people working there, who happened to be Nick Dragata, he was working for Lee at the time. He got engaged and moved, and so that a spot opened up in Lee's studio. So I went to work for Lee, kind of like
Swipe that from Nick.
Yeah, yeah. Where is he now? Anyway, but yeah,
somewhere over there.
Yeah, just over there in Artist Alley, and amazing book East of West. So so I was flatting, which is like a first step in coloring. A lot of colorists use flatters. I was one of Lee's flatters. And we scanning original art and cleaning it up, a bunch of just like grunt work for Lee. So that's how I got my start, and then I eventually did some color work in his studio, and then a little bit more, and then started meeting people at conventions that were kind of like trying to break in as writers and artists, and they needed colorists, but they didn't exactly have any money. But I had a day job coloring, at Lee's studio, and then I would just kind of do these side gigs on my own. At night, yeah. Just to get, it was like, I want my name in a book, so when I try to register as a pro for a convention, they'll believe me that and so it was like, oh, I get a free badge if I'll color this book. And anyway, so I just kept making all these connections at conventions with people who eventually, come to find out, became like big name writers and artists, and I rode their coattails right into places like Marvel and then Further Image Books and DC, stuff like that. So yeah. No, that's the quick answer.
Were you a reader of comics?
Yeah, until my mom took them all away when she thought they were terrible for me, which I like to rub in her face now that I work in comics.
I don't know the process of coloring,
Sure.
like maybe I would for writing or for more traditional art. Can you walk us through that process at all?
So we received the files, black and white from the artist or from the publisher, whoever, and you wouldn't have to use a flatter. So a flatter is just someone who takes that black and white file and just puts in flat colors. They could be, literally any color, like hot pink skin and, a purple sky and whatever. It doesn't matter because the colors don't have to be right. But once those colors are laid in, it's easy for me to then just quickly grab them with a tool, with like one click, as opposed to, say, tracing the shape of this hand. I could just take another tool, click, and I've got the shape of that hand, and I can start to color it. So that the flatter lays in all these flat colors, which saves me 45 minutes or something on a page, like if I were to have done that myself. So it makes more sense for me to have a flatter flat all of my 6 books. So I can color, otherwise I could only color 3 books because I'd have to spend all that time flatting those books, then coloring them. So I can do more work overall if I hand off that first step.
You have worked in more traditional books, like in the Marvel sphere, and now are working on some really cool independent creator-based comics.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the difference between those two styles?
A lot of colorists can take on multiple projects per month, and so I'm one of those. I have, I think, about 6 books going right now, and so I like it because basically, like every week or every few days, I'm working on this book. Then the next few days, I'm working on this book. So basically, every few days, I get to kind of just completely change the style of coloring I'm doing or the way I'm thinking about colors. So it's refreshing to me. I don't envy artists who have to spend 30 days on the same thing, and then they get a little break and do 30 on the exact same thing again. I mean, I know there's a lot of, they can find variety in different ways, but I get to drastically change my approach and the stuff I'm doing almost on a weekly basis, so it keeps it fresh. And the difference between creator-owned and superhero books or kind of big 2 stuff often lends itself to that change where, my week of working on Thor is drastically different than my week of working on Paper Girls, for example, just because one's a much simpler style in terms of rendering. And then I just think about the palettes differently in the 2 books. And so I enjoy the variety.
Can you talk about the collaboration process between you and your artists and your writers and all of those notes kind of conglomerating into one piece?
Yeah, well, and Paper Girls is a good example. Cliff and I had worked together on Wonder Woman for 3 years prior to Paper Girls. And I told Cliff, I always think I'm like, people are ready to dump me. So I'm like, Cliff, I get it. Like, we worked together 3 years. If you want another colorist, it won't hurt my feelings. And he was like, no, let's just, like, our creative process had come a long way because we worked together so much that we figured a lot of stuff out.
Mind melding.
Yeah, exactly. So he's like, let's not blow that up. But he was he was changing his art and the way he wanted to draw things. So he said, well, let's just take a different approach creatively towards this next project, stay together, but try something new, and that way neither of us get bored. And so anyway, so he had some ideas of what he wanted. So I got kind of notes early on, and we had a lot of discussions over the phone or email about the overall direction he was thinking for Paper Girls. Some of that determined by the story. It starts off set in the 80s, so that informed some of the decisions in the color. And then just in general, like he wanted, like in Wonder Woman, it was very saturated, very not bright and saturated, very Pixar-like palettes, versus Paper Girls, where he wanted to be a little more muted, a little lighter touch to the colors. So I got a lot of notes from him on the front end on that. Same thing with like The Wicked and the Divine. Yeah. Jamie and Kieran and I, of course, have worked together a lot prior to that book. And when we went from Young Avengers, which was our title previous to Wicked and Divine, into Wicked and Divine, we talked about some of the things we had been doing and how we wanted to either amp those up or push them in a slightly different direction once we got on The Wicked and the Divine.
How do you think color lends itself to the storytelling?
I mean, there is no one color for anger or one color for sadness, but, color plus value plus saturation or contrast, all these things I can play with that I feel will evoke these certain emotions. And so as long as, if I need to be paying attention to the thing Kieran's trying to get across and Jamie's trying to get across and help that as much as I can. And so I think if you were to ignore that, the book would still read as it's intended, but it just would be 10% less, impactful, or whatever percentage, less impactful. So it's, like I said, most of it's already there in the script, most of it's already there in the art. But if a colorist is or a rainbow maker, as I was introduced.
A rainbow maker.
No, so if a colorist, ignores that or is just not sensitive to those things, then you're just missing an opportunity to make the story better.
Folks, go on over to Skybound.com and watch the full interview. Make sure to follow Matt Wilson on the old social webby, like Twitter, the Instagrams, all that kind of stuff. And if you haven't already, go read Paper Girls and The Wicked and the Divine.
Like and comment on the video and let us know in the comments what book of Matt's is your favorite. Subscribe to Skybound and we'll see you all next week.
Come on back. We're friendly. And high five to segue us out.
Goodbye, everyone.